Hi, Tony from All the Remote Things here again today. I've got Jason and Gareth with me, and they've both got the last name Edge, so I'm assuming that they're related, but we'll go there in a moment. How are you, gentlemen?
We're
Very well, thank you, Tony.
Brilliant. Look, I'm going to get you to introduce yourselves as I do on this cast, and I think, before we started, there was a bit of a flip the card and a coin, and Gareth, you won, so let's start with you.
Great, thanks, Tony. I'm Gareth, and as you guessed it, with the surname Edge, we are brothers, so we've got a fair bit of history. Most of it good, I'm happy to say. But together we make up the founding team of a company called ThoughtForma, which is a no-code platform to help people bring their ideas to life in the form of digital applications. And we'll get into a bit more of that in a moment, I guess. Personally, I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years now. I've played pretty much every role there is to play in the software development lifecycle. Since the early days of my career, I've been focused mainly on software delivery projects. I've worked in a wide range of organizations, from tiny little startups, some of which have gone on to do great things. Others have fallen into the startup graveyard. I've worked for large corporates in the finance and tech world. But basically, one of the things that since the start of my career, Jason and I have had very close ties. And we've often discussed ideas around forming a purposeful startup together. And really, the opportunity sort of came to us when we both realized that we both want to try and improve things when it comes to technology and application development. We've both seen the same kind of issues in that space. We've seen people struggle with bringing their ideas to life and building out applications in all shapes and sizes. And really, those struggles are due to technology barriers, it seems to us. So that really motivated us to try to democratize technology and make it much more accessible, ultimately kind of remove those barriers that are preventing people from realizing their ideas. And that's really the core of what we're working towards with ThoughtForma. So that was, probably about 4 years ago now. I was at a conference in Lisbon, and Al Gore did this amazing keynote speech where he was basically calling to arms the technologists in the audience. And he basically said, the way that we're going to solve this crisis is on you guys, right? You're the guys that are going to bring us the ideas and the technologies to get things solved. And it really struck a chord with me at that moment. I was like, I really need to do something here. So I thought, I came away from that and thought, I might not be the one that's got the idea to solve, climate crisis, but maybe I can help people that do have that idea, that maybe an idea would have remained locked in somebody's head if they didn't have access to, technology or accessible technology that could help them bring it to the fore. So, I brought that back to Jason. We discussed it. We discussed everything that we've been talking about throughout our careers. And we said, let's do it. Let's go build this thing. So we started building it. We've been building it for the last 4 years now. We've got to the stage now that we're actually using it to build out real applications. And so the next step for us is to bring it to the masses, get it to the market, and get it into other people's hands so that they can start bringing their ideas to life as well.
That's brilliant. Hey, look, even the dogs were enjoying that one. So
oh, no.
It's one of those things. Somebody's let the door open and in they come. Never mind. Jason, that means we probably want to hear from you as well.
Okay. Yeah, so as Gareth says, we've had very similar careers in some respects. I guess there's a couple of different focuses for me towards the end of my sort of technical career. So been doing a lot of architecture, software and data architecture, and then specializing in data management and data governance, which sounds incredibly tedious, but it's actually the thing that's allowing organizations and governments even to get more value out of data. And that's the stuff that sits inside all of these applications, really. So that sort of culminated in me leading a team that devised the strategy, data strategy for the entire Abu Dhabi government. Quite a big undertaking. But what's important about that is that, you know, it's a really difficult thing for organizations to do. And what we wanted to do was actually put all of those sort of best practices and power into ThoughtForma, so that even startups, you know, as they're building their applications using ThoughtForma, are actually getting all these best practices built in for free. Maybe not for free, but, you know, without having to think about it. And so we just think that's a really good way of going. You know, it's not even now that it's developers that can do this stuff. It's anybody that just wants to build something can just drag some blocks around on a screen, and they actually get, you know, a robust production-ready application out the back of it. And that really excites us, that we're not only sort of allowing what Al Gore was talking about, you know, this army of technologists to solve world problems, but we're actually increasing that army, that everybody becomes technologists. So that's really our mission.
That's brilliant. Let me dig a bit deeper into what ThoughtForma is, because, you know, it's easy to say it's sort of no code or whatever it is, but let's bring that a little bit more to life for people. What does it actually do?
So ThoughtForma is a no-code platform that allows people to build digital applications. So in essence, if you want to build a web or a mobile application, you can use, it's got like a drag and drop interface there, so that you can easily lay things out as your application would require. But it also allows you to build data into your applications as they require them. It allows you to create quite sophisticated workflows. It allows you to integrate with third-party providers, such as payment systems like Stripe and PayPal and other systems. But really, the key differentiator for us is that we built ThoughtForma from the back to the front. So we concentrated on the back-end elements of the engine, if for want of a better word, and we built that using the kind of leading edge cloud services. We've architected it to be 100% serverless. So what that means is that it takes away the headache of having to manage servers, you know, having to think about server capacity, having to think about scaling your applications. You know, all of that is taken care of, and that's hidden away from our end user. So if our end user was to come up with the next Uber or the next Airbnb or whatever it is, and suddenly they get millions of users using their application overnight, ThoughtForma will scale for them. It will scale their application automatically. They'll never have to worry about, oh, crikey, I need to go and buy another 1,000 servers somewhere.
Can I just add something to that, Tony? So I think you know, so if you think about those kind of applications that people might want to be building, everybody always thinks about the final application and the way it appears to people. And that's, you know, and that is important. That's the bit that everybody gets to use. But what's not necessarily clear is that there is all this horrible technical stuff going on in the background. It sounds incredibly complex. You know, Gareth said we put all the emphasis on that stuff. And the reason we did that was just so that literally nobody ever has to even know it's there. Even the people that are building stuff, they don't have to think about it. So they can just think about what the front end looks like and how it's going to appear to their users and behave and all that kind of stuff. I start building my application. I just know that all that other complicated stuff in the background is there, and it's just doing its thing.
Yeah, I think that I was going to say, you know, that's very exciting, because, you know, I've been in technology a long time, like yourselves, as we were talking about, but it's the technology that you in the background that you're talking about, that you need to know to take an application from woe to go, if you were building it from scratch. Yeah. Is a gigantic task, and literally very, very hard for one person or a small team to pull out without getting all of these different people, and even the dependencies from those people on the different cloud providers and etc. And what you've done is you've pared that down into essential, taken away that worry, and just made it so that they can think about how it's going to get used and what it's going to get used for. And I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, we do too.
I can see that. And I want to ask, where did the idea come from? So I heard a little bit of that in what you were saying. So firstly, who came up with the idea? And then, so I'm pointing both gentlemen there. Who came up with the idea, let's claim it. But where did the actual thought for this particular thing come from? Because it seems to me that a lot of people have had this thought, but never really coalesced it into this simplicity before.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to let Jason start with the technology aspect, because I think that came first, right? So I would say that the idea organically came after the initial technology. So Jason, why don't you talk a little bit about the tech aspect?
So I mentioned earlier that I've been doing some work in data governance, and one of the most important things about getting value out of data is actually being able to map an organization. So let me give an example of that. So, go into any organization and ask them what all of their products, what all of their services, what all of the processes are, where all the people are, what's the structure of the organization. And you'd be surprised how many organizations would struggle to answer that question. So data governance is all about, is about saying, well, let's just map an organization and understand it so that we can then understand how data needs to flow to get value from it. So I was working in that sphere and trying to actually come up with some kind of flexible way of being able to describe any organization. And so I started to put together some flexible ways of being able to construct data and construct pictures of organizations. And that kind of became, we've obviously rebuilt the thing from that, from those days, but that became the sort of foundation of being able to do something flexibly on the back end, that you can then start to use data to describe anything, including, UIs and user interfaces and data and workflows and events and all these kind of things that, when put together, becomes an application. So Gareth was aware that flexible stuff was going on, and I was working on that. And then came along his sort of vision at this summit. So over to Gareth.
Yeah, so I mean, it really truly was one of those kind of eureka moments at the summit where I literally got goosebumps at certain points when Al Gore was talking, knowing that we had the power to do something here. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I knew that if I went back with the enthusiasm and the passion for there's a big problem here that we can solve in some way, that Jason would probably subscribe to it as well. So we got together and we started talking about how we could make use of some of the technology that he had already been working on. And actually, in its initial format, it was not a no-code platform at all. We just talked about how we could build applications more quickly using this framework that Jason had been working on. And in the very early days, we set about it being more of a digital consultancy. So, being able to just crank out applications really, really quickly on behalf of clients was the first foray into the startup world for us. However, what happened is, as we started to get more and more serious about things and learn about what startup life was all about and what building a business was all about, we really quickly just latched on to the fact that a consultancy is not scalable. It's down to the two of us, and there's no way that we can clone ourselves to get any growth here. And then we started thinking, well, hang on a second, we can open this up to people. We can start putting a front end on this stuff so that people can actually use it themselves to start forming applications. And I remember that day where we actually did a design sprint on how this thing might look, and I built this idea of how the front end might look in a wireframe tool called Balsamic.
Oh yes.
And it was awesome. It was a really great experience. And I remember saying to Jason, so let's go about turning this into a prototype. And he said to me, well, we're going to go a step further than that. We're actually going to build something that actually works. And I remember saying to him, nah, that's impossible. And literally within a 2-week sprint, we had the basis for ThoughtForma. We had something that was actually producing real applications, albeit rudimentary, but it was doing something. And it was at that point that we knew we had something, and we just had to turn this into a reality.
That's a brilliant story, and not even a hint of sibling rivalry there. So that was great. Very even. All right. Let's take it a bit further down the track. You said you were a startup, and having been in the startup world ourselves with Remote AF, I know the fun of the fair. But as you start to operational and productize that, I'll touch on how we actually got to know each other, and that's through a good friend of the show. Shout out to Barry O'Reilly. And Barry is, I've known him for many years, and we've done a cast with him, which will be out shortly. And yourselves had the opportunity to meet and match and have him as a mentor. Talk to me a little bit about how that you went to this next level, because that'll bring us into talking a bit about Nobody Studios. So.
Yeah, sure. So we had the great pleasure of meeting Barry O'Reilly at a conference a little over 4 years ago now, where he was doing a keynote. And Jason and I went to the pub afterwards and basically accosted him and just spent a little bit of time kind of giving our vision around what ThoughtForma could be. And he seemed quite excited by it, and basically said to us, well, look, I'm off to Australia now for a month, but I can set aside some time to talk more about this. So we did. We got on a call with him and talked through things at great length. And he went away, and within about a week he came back and said, how about I become an executive advisor to your company? At which point Jason and I were just like, yay. I remember putting this in my calendar as this is traction day.
Very cool.
So he came on board, and he's just been amazing for us. He's introduced us to so many amazing people. He's put structure around how we actually do things operationally, and he's really helped us with strategy. He's been a master facilitator for so many of our meetings, where I think without him we would have been rudderless. And so he's really helped us find a direction, and the opportunities that he's put in front of us have really been, the secret sauce to where we've got to today. I remember one particular introduction where he introduced us to a boutique agency that do things like design sprints for very large corporates and help them through that kind of process. And from that introduction, we struck up a relationship whereby we said, well, look, maybe there's an opportunity where we can use ThoughtForma within a design sprint to kind of elevate it to a new level, whereby at the end of a design sprint, you're not just getting a prototype, you're actually getting a working application. And we did that twice with this organization, and quite honestly, the results were just astonishing. And we talk about remote, right? So basically this design sprint was fully remote. People were coming from all corners of the world to be involved in a week-long design sprint event. They'd never met each other. It was just a bunch of strangers. And we went through the whole process of a design sprint. By the end of it, we had also trained them on the usage of ThoughtForma. They had used ThoughtForma in a collaborative manner to actually produce an application, which on the 5th day of the design sprint, they also iterated. So had customers come in and give them feedback, and they made changes to it. And by the end of it, they walked away with an application. And that all came from knowing Barry, but what came off the back of that was just incredible in terms of feedback into our own product, some validation around things that worked, some invalidation around things that we thought worked that didn't. And it's just opportunities like that have been incredible. And I'll stop talking now and let Jason talk.
That's pretty about. I can see you're excited about it, and you should be excited about it, because that's pretty damn exciting.
So just
quickly as that.
Just to take it to the next level, then Barry became involved in a new studio venture in the States, based in the States, called Nobody Studios. And to cut a long story short, we were acquired by Nobody Studios as one of their portfolio companies a couple of months ago. So Barry is in there, we're in there, things are getting very exciting. Just to give an idea of what the Nobody Studios organization is about. So Nobody Studios is about, well, their hairy, audacious goal is to produce 100 companies, build and launch 100 companies in 5 years. And so clearly, to do something like that, you know, a lot of those companies will involve technology, and, you know, having a building block like ThoughtForma to help you build out some of those companies is certainly going to be important. So we've actually gone in as in sort of two different levels. One as one of those companies that comes out the back of Nobody Studios, but also as one of the companies that helps them produce other companies. So it's all been really exciting.
Yeah, that is very exciting. Let's talk about that, because we were talking about that off air, and I wanted to talk to you about how you built things in remote. One of those things is you built an actual product for Nobody Studios themselves, and you've done that in a remote way. So let's chat about that, because I think it's the right point to talk about. I think the product was called Ovations. Yeah,
that's right, Ovations, which is a brand new talent marketplace. It's out there now, literally just getting launched. So really hot off the press. So I think there's a couple of levels here where remote comes in, because obviously we're building ThoughtForma ourselves. Gareth and I actually live about 15 minutes away, but we never meet.
See, now before distributed, you're so distributed remote that you're remote from each other.
So I want to talk about that very quickly, and then I'll also talk about Ovations. So ThoughtForma, we actually run that as a fully agile development thing. So we have daily stand-ups, we have sprints, and we've done that for several years now. And so that's kind of something that we've taken into Ovations as well. So yeah, ThoughtForma is being built as a distributed thing. We really do run that as a fully agile process. But obviously we're literally only 15 minutes away from each other. However, Ovations, being part of one of the Nobody Studios portfolio companies, is actually spread literally across the globe. So Barry is involved in that. He's over in Manila. But we've got the basis of Nobody Studios is on the west coast of the States, and we've got everything in between. So that's been really interesting, because we're having to set up a cadence of regular meetings to get design input, and then we're currently developing Ovations on top of ThoughtForma. So we're doing that using sprints, 2-week sprints, and delivering those. So we'll run 3-week sprints with that one, delivering the stuff back into the team for them to look at. So yeah, I think having some structure around the way that you're building things when you're working remotely is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, and you'll recognize this, Tony, that with startups, 9 to 5 just goes out the window, right? It just doesn't exist anymore. So you've got to have that level of flexibility to say, well, I'm happy to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or work at midnight, you know, to accommodate. And we've been really lucky to meet such an amazing group of people that are exactly the same. They're all cut from the same mold in that respect. You know, they're super motivated. They're really happy to work at, like, you know, unusual times, inconvenient times often. But you've also got to kind of set those boundaries at the start, right? You have that hard discussion right at the beginning of a project and say, look, we've got to cross numerous time zones here, so we've got to find a way to do this in a way that's going to be effective. And largely it comes down to communication, getting the right channels in place. You know, tools like Slack are just indispensable these days. You've also got to have this willingness to jump on things as they happen, because, you know, something could come up at some point in somebody's day where actually you could make a real difference if you respond to it there and then, rather than leaving it overnight, which means that they've got to wait an entire, they kind of lose the answer to that for an entire day. So having that flexibility and just making really good use of those communication channels, and setting up, a decent cadence of meetings that works for everybody has been absolutely key for us.
There's a couple of things that have been really important to me in that whole experience. And one is, whenever I receive an email from Nova Studios, our footer has got in it, I'm sending you this, I might be sending this out of hours for me or even for you. And I'm doing that, to help me sort of balance my well-being. And you should do the same. So, get to respond to this whenever is convenient for you. And I think that's the thing, it's the tolerance in that. So Gareth talked about the fact that people are willing to get involved, but equally, all of those people have got a tolerance of realizing that, we're not always going to be able to do that. And everybody's very, very good about that. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is this whole asynchronous thing, which all of that goes to. I think we use a lot of videos. So we'll actually talk to each other via video, which we can deliver into, say, a Slack channel, and people can pick that up. So here's a 5-minute update of what I've done, or here's a problem I've got, or whatever. I think, just being asynchronous about the way you work is really crucial.
Yeah, I concur. And it's interesting to hear that from you, because I'll just take my questions and I'll throw them over there because I don't need them.
Too much.
The question I was going to ask, is you were talking about the synchronous nature of jumping the timelines. What a lot of organizations don't do is design that to the context of the people that they're working with in their organization and think about that async. So it really interests me to hear that you use that kind of that video communication. So how do you create the feedback loops back from that, though, is the question that I'm interested in.
So I'll pick that. So one of the things is we have some structure about the way we do things generally. So I think that's important. So as I say, we're using 3-week sprints for ovations, and I started off by saying they were 2-week sprints because that's the way we usually go. But in this case, we're actually having to get involved in more of the design aspects as well. So often there's a distinction between the delivery team and the people that are coming up with the requirements and needs. In this case, because it's such a small team, and because there's so much dependency on us, from a ThoughtForma development aspect as well at the moment, we have to get involved in that. So we have a whole week where it's about design, and we have a couple of meetings with the team on that as we're sort of coming up with ideas for the sprint. And then we have the 2-week delivery sprint with the usual sort of, showing some stuff as you go along, but a review at the end of it. So we always know that we've got that framework to work within anyway. We know that we're going to get, to week 3, and there's going to be some kind of communication, and everybody gets to see stuff. So if things are happening asynchronously along the way there, if things are getting missed, you've got various sort of points where you can pick up and say, that's really important to me. Can you tell me where you got to on that? So I think it's making sure you've got that structure there that means that you guaranteed some regular meetings with people. And that allows you to then have the freedom to respond to things within that time.
I'll just add to that as well, because I think that that's when things are clearly well structured. But of course, that's not always the case, and when we and often not.
In startup land, we all know. Yeah.
So when we're working in a less structured situation where maybe we've produced a video to showcase maybe something that we've been working on and to solicit feedback, we would just use tools like Slack to put that out in the correct channels, and then have people respond to it. And based on responses, sometimes it's like, okay, well, probably 3 or 4 of us should just jump on a call and talk this through. And so that'll literally be the feedback loop at that point. It would be, respond to this in a thread and say some great points there. Let's try and find time today or whenever's going to work for 3 or 4 of us to jump on a call and let's talk through this. And that's been really effective because, as I mentioned before, everybody's just so happy to give their time whenever they can that we can make that work.
Yeah, I think that's the what you've done is something that a lot of organizations struggle to, that we work with, and it's thinking about you designing it to the context of your organization, whilst having that empathy for people's personal situations, right? Your work is in your home is in your work. So therefore you have to understand how you're going to interact and making sure that they're comfortable in their own zone. So I applaud that. That's absolutely brilliant. One more question for you. Where are you headed? So you've told us a lot about how you got there, what it is. You're very excited about the product. So I can only assume that you do have a future direction. And if you're happy to share, I'd love to hear where you're headed with it. What's next for ThoughtForma?
I'd love to share that with you. Yes. Like as we've alluded to, coming into the studio has been a momentous occasion for us, and it's been the start of something where we feel like we've just had rocket fuel injected into us. Jason and I have been battling away at this for years, and now suddenly we've come into this. It feels, this organization where they've wrapped their arms around us and they've opened up their resources to us, which has been such an enlightening situation and experience for us. But what it's also allowed us to do is to get really serious on strategizing, figuring out where this product is going, how we're going to bring it to market, how we're going to get additional funding in the future, in the near term and the long term. But it's also given us this this chance to figure out where we can really differentiate ourselves, where we can really put our North Star, and where we can really sort of, drive really hard towards achieving. And I think that what we've come up with is super exciting. So in the no-code world, it's a crowded space. The market is full of competitors, and they're all doing great jobs in their individual lanes of helping people build applications, whether it be web, whether it be mobile, whatever. But they're really, I feel, concentrating purely on the output of an application. Where we want to take ThoughtForma is beyond that. So we're introducing this concept of what we call intelligent no code, where it's not just the output of an application, but you're helping the user on their entire business building journey. So the kind of things that we're thinking is, intelligent no code could be helping users build their applications by giving them layout recommendations. It could be helping them in terms of like where they put their call to actions on their pages, all the way through to actionable analytics for increased revenue. So we could start making use of data and data points and artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques that will start recommending changes to the users. So it can start recommending changes that they can try out. We can even suggest like complex A/B tests that we can automatically do on behalf of the user. We could say, look, if you make this change, we think that you're going to get an X uptick in revenue. Do you want to try and push that out to 20% of your user base? And let's do that for 1 week and see what the results are. And if it works, we can switch everybody over to it. If it doesn't, we can switch it back. And we just think that this concept is going to be basically category defining and very disruptive. And we're getting very excited about where we can take it.
I can see why. And that's a very admirable piece of work, because if you can bring that to life, that's going to make a lot of organizations very easy for them to build and create products. Gentlemen, we're very close to the end of our time, unfortunately. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. We've talked a lot about everything, but how do people get in touch with you? How do they get involved with ThoughtForma itself?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to come to our website. We've got a website at www.thoughtforma.com. And also, really, the easiest way via social media is our LinkedIn company page, which is just ThoughtForma. So if you contact us through either of those channels, that's going to be the easiest way for us to connect and see how we can move things forward.
Absolutely fantastic. Look, Jason, Gareth, thanks for being on with us on all the remote things. If you're listening to this, please subscribe, like, so we can keep this thing going. Don't forget, Remote AF's now got the Remote AF community on remoteaf.co. Just click the community button, join us. We have all sorts of live stream events, and we have people who join us there to discuss all the remote things and all things remote. And again, Jason, Gareth, fantastic to have you on. Thank you for spending your time with us today.
Thank you for having us, Tony. It's been a pleasure.